Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the opportunity for our team to present research results at the 8th International Conference on Sustainable Agriculture and Environment. Our research is entitled Historical Study of Peat Protection Policy to Prevent Forest and Land Fires in Indonesia, 1990 to 2020. The occurrence of forest and land fires in Indonesia cannot be separated from the destruction of peat ecosystem, especially due to the expansion of land-based industries such as agriculture, plantation, forestry, development, to infrastructure. Forest and land fires continue to recur into the 20th century and have caused disaster that not only impacted the environment but also the local and national economy. Many actors and factors have contributed to the persistence of forest and land fires, one of which is the inconsistency between policies and their implementation in the field. In addition, due to the ineffectiveness of formal government institutions and the classic cause where many people still do not know about government policies related to the peat ecosystem restoration caused by the lack of access to public policy information. The qualitative normative research method uses a historical approach, referring to the national policies of the government of the Republic of Indonesia in the form of general policies and implementation policies. Research studies are limited to 3 decades between 1990 to 2020. Primary data was obtained through interviews, while the secondary data was obtained through library research and online data retrieval. Data presentation will be conducted every decade or every 10 years to see the direction of peat use and protection policies in Indonesia. Peat protection and management policy fires on peatlands are very difficult to extinguish compared to other lands. The impact of fires on the peatlands can produce harmful carbon emission in the atmosphere so that it can have an impact on human health. In period 1990 to 2000, the policy to tackle forest and land fires is actually not a new thing in Indonesia. Even the policy of controlling fire has existed since the colonial period in 1890 to 1938, including community efforts independently to localize the spread of hotspot or the wet curtain system. However, in Indonesia's positive law, the government only issued a policy after the massive fires in 1982 to 1983 that burned around 3.6 million forests and land in East Kalimantan and repeated incidents after that in 1987 in the western part of Sumatra, Kalimantan, and East Kalimantan. East Timor covering an area of 66,000 hectares and burned again at the same location in 1991 with an area reaching 500,000 hectares. Several policies issued by the government indeed do not explicitly include the word peat or peat ecosystem, but their existence is closely related to the protection of peat governance at the time, and then becomes the basis for further evaluation or improvement of policies. As you can see in this slide, is a table of various government policies to protect peat in efforts to control forest and land fires in Indonesia in the period 1990 to 2000. In period 2001 until 2010, given the enormous potential and specific factors of Indonesia's peatlands, during this period, the government specifically developed a strategic framework for peatland management, compiled by the National Peatland Management Working Group in a document called the National Strategy and Action Plan for Sustainable Peatland Management. It regulates effective and synergistic peatland management between stakeholders, both at the central and regional levels, including financing mechanism, monitoring, and evaluation mechanism. As you can see in this table that presents data on government policies to protect peat in efforts to control forest and land fires in Indonesia in the period 2001 until 2010. In this period, Indonesia stepped forward to improve forest governance, especially peat ecosystem. There has been a radical change from a policy perspective, as well as strong political leadership and transparency from everyone involved in peatland management. Fires from peatlands contribute greatly to greenhouse gas emission, so the government is committed to reducing carbon dioxide emission by 26% with its own efforts and 41% with international assistance. Various policies for sustainable peat protection, either directly or indirectly issued by the government in the period 2011 to 2020, as seen in this table. The biggest change in peat protection policy occurred between 2015 to 2020. There has been a shift in the working paradigm from extinguishing to controlling fires, taking into account the sustainable peat ecosystem. It is not easy to know the exact figures of the total area affected by forest and land fires because various official government sources and various institutions report different figures. It was only in 2016 that the government, through the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, who acted as the data guardian, released data on burn area and hotspot that could be accessed from SIPONGI, or the Information System for Warning and Early Detection of Forest and Land Fire Control. The Forest Fire Data Information Management System and Fire Alert from SIPONGI are considered to have worked well technically and in the concept of using technology. Hotspot data from 1919 to 2015 is not available by the government. In 2016, the first time hotspot data was presented publicly by the government, referring to the Terra Aqua satellite data, it was recorded that the hotspot reached 70,971. With the intervention of various policies, the number of hotspots and the area burned has decreased significantly. Even though it is a large hotspot, there is no transboundary smoke because hotspots are interfered more quickly, not a national disaster. After that, a true evaluation was carried out for the field work team, especially strengthening the prevention aspect. Comparison of total hotspot in 2019, the decline in hotspot on 2020 reached 91.32%. Over the past 3 decades, the government has issued many regulations or policies related to peat protection to prevent forest and land fires. There are around 8 policies in the form of laws, 11 government regulations, 1 presidential decree, 7 presidential instruction, up to sectoral implementation policies through 7 ministerial regulations and 3 ministerial decrees. The dynamic of peat-related policies over the past 3 decades have changed and been corrected for various reasons, ranging from lawsuits in the Constitutional Court to policy simplification or regulatory deregulation through Omnibus Law in 2020. Protection and management of peatlands in Indonesia in the first decade in 1919 to 2000 was more focused on the use of peat by prioritizing development values and less in favor of environmental values. In the second decade in 2001 until 2010, peat protection and management policies were still weak. It was only in 2009 that Law 32 was issued which regulates the protection of peat ecosystem entering the third decade, 2011 to 2020. Precisely through Presidential Instruction 10 of 2011, the policy direction of the Indonesian government began to lead the sustainable use of peatlands. However, between regulations there is still a dichotomy between economic and environmental interest, so that there is still a massive release of forest areas that correlates with the increase in hotspot in 2013. In the middle of the third decade or after 2015 forest fires, policy correction and corrections of action were carried out as a whole that further strengthened the utilization and peat protection including environmental law enforcement. At this time, the Indonesian government's policies consistently lead the sustainable peat management, which does not only stop at the regulatory aspect but also implementation down to the site level. A policy that only sees peat as an entity to be exploited will correlate with an increase in the area of burned land and the number of hotspots that continue to occur significantly after several years of regulation being enacted. Seen in the 2 decades in 1919 to 2010, the area of forest and land fires was around 28,970,209 hectares. However, when the policy prioritizes the utilization and protection aspects of peat while at the same time seeing it as a unified ecosystem, the result can interfere with the total burned area to 9,153,874 in the 2011 to 2020. Even with policy corrections and corrective actions that changed the paradigm of blackouts to prevention after the 2015 incident, the number of hotspots in Indonesia can be reduced to more than 90% in 2020. That's all for the presentation of our research result. Thank you very much for your great attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.